you are working with teen families, you probably have a lot of experience with fusion or enmeshment between a parent and their child. I just had supervision with one of my awesome associates, and this topic came up, and it sort of inspired me to do a crash video on it that I'm calling the Lightning Lecture. The number one question that I get from associates or when I'm supervising or training people is, what do I do about it? I had the same questions earlier in my career, and I spent an extraordinary amount of time scouring the internet for exercises, interventions, activities that would align with my orientation. And maybe I was looking in the wrong places, but I didn't really find a lot. There's one activity that I use often that I did find and I've developed and used quite successfully. At the end of this video, I'll explain the activity and hopefully it will make sense and be really useful to you. So hit subscribe if you want more videos or more ideas on how to work with families and teenagers. In order to really get enmeshment, I think it's important to go back to understand how our sense of self develops. And if we think about our journey from being an infant to an adult, our identity or our sense of self fills in over time. Exactly how this process happens depends on what school of theory you're looking at, but my go-to is Bowen's theory of differentiation. He puts everything on a scale of 0 to 100, with newborn babies being 0 and a fully differentiated person being 100. Now, nobody on the planet reaches 100, maybe Oprah, but it's the goal that we should be aspiring to meet. When you outline psychological development on a scale like this, you can overlay pretty much any other theory over the top. It's useful to look at Piaget's developmental theory, and that is because we are talking about teenagers, and it's quite helpful. Before you start pulling out family systems tricks with a teenager, I think you have to assess what level of development they are in. Piaget highlights this shift in the way that teenagers learn that happens in early teenage years from a more concrete way of thinking and learning. Using family systems techniques, which involves more abstract thinking and understanding reciprocal relationships, is not going to work with a teenager who is still in the concrete way of thinking. They're too linear in their approach to understanding things. Solution-based and CBT-based therapy are going to be more effective for these kids. Murray Bowen said it's best to understand someone not as an individual psychological unit, but as a functional part of the family. And psychoanalysts have had the same sort of idea, with Winnicott saying there's no such thing as a baby. What that means for working with teens is that their identity is not fully developed yet and is still very much part of the family system or the primary caregiver. Healthy teenage development is actually all about an active resistance to this fusion with the family unit. The rebelliousness of teenagers is all about finding an individual identity outside of the family. But there's a major flaw in everything that I've described so far, and that is because nobody, aside from Oprah, actually reaches a full level of differentiation. So that means that every adult, including me and you, are not fully differentiated. The sense of self is not fully formed. The boundaries around ourselves are not entirely solid, and we tend to borrow a sense of self from the people around us. The goal of therapy then is to help people move up the scale of differentiation closer towards 100. And we do that by helping them distinguish their thoughts from their feelings, differentiate those two aspects of self, develop a sense of identity, our own values, beliefs, and guiding principles that take us through life. This is one of the main reasons why I don't work with teenagers individually as much anymore. I think it's impossible to see them as individuals when they go home to a family which they're still trying to differentiate from. Their sense of self is too entwined in their caregivers. If you redraw the scale of differentiation with this reality-based idea of adults not being fully differentiated, you get a different picture. No matter how old the teen is, we still don't get two fully separated individuals. And that means when your teenage client grows up to be old enough to date someone, they're going to meet someone who is also not differentiated. And when two partially differentiated people meet, there is always a chance of this overlap that I'm depicting here, which could be fusion, which could be enmeshment and codependency. And your job would be to help them become two separate selves in a relationship. And the same is true when a teenage client comes in and there's some fusion or enmeshment with their parent. Your job is to help that teenager become an individual away from their parents in the most therapeutic way possible. This is a family map, which is not dissimilar from the situation my associate was talking to me about. If you don't fully understand a family map, there are other videos on my YouTube channel that will explain it to you. They are an awesome tool and I highly recommend you check it out. The teenager in this family scenario has a lot of power or influence and is in a lot of conflict with mum. Mum and dad have some distance between them, and the teen seems to be a bit enmeshed with dad. Cutoff is another relationship line that you can depict, but it's not appropriate for this family. What we're looking at is called a cross-generational alliance. The enmeshment between the IP and dad combined with the conflict towards mum seems to indicate this pattern. If you're only working with the teenager, this is going to be harder to get, and if you have done, that is pretty amazing. So what this means is often that the teenager is carrying some of the thoughts and feelings of the parent because of this fusion or enmeshment. So think of those porous boundaries allowing thoughts or feelings to flow in between two people that are enmeshed. Dad might be very conscious of his resentment towards his wife, or it might be unconscious. So he could resent her for working too much, for making more money than he does. But because of these boundaries again, and because of the overlap and enmeshment, the thoughts and feelings flow down into your teenage client. Your teenager might be repeating some of the same thoughts and behaviors towards mom that dad does, or it could be more unconscious, in which case there isn't much of an explanation of why the teen is so resentful towards mom. Some of the examples that I can think of that I've seen are refusing to talk to a parent, refusing to talk to mum's side of the family, and having the same thoughts and attitudes about food and nutrition. So the big question is, well, what do I do about it? The worksheet and activity is all about helping the client, the teenager, see that they are having the same thoughts as their parents, and then asking them to decide if they want to keep them or have their own thoughts and feelings and behaviors. The worksheet looks something like this. There are two columns. The top right hand corner is blocked out because we're going to talk about the same problem. Ignore the second column for now and focus on the parent and the shared problem that the teen and the parent have. So it could be about food, it could be about hating dad, it could be, the shared belief. The teenager might not have the consciousness or awareness of a shared problem, so it's totally okay if you identify the problem and lead this a little bit. And then you fill in the rest of the squares, the parent's feelings about the problem, thoughts about the problems, and behaviors about the problem. Whenever I've done this with a teenager, these answers come pretty quickly, so they're able to identify their parents' feelings, thoughts, and behaviors quite easily. Then you switch to the other side of the worksheet, but you're focusing on the same problem. And if you're right about this, you're going to get very similar wording about the feelings, the thoughts, and the behaviors towards the problem, whether it's food or a parent. And the beauty of the two columns is that it becomes very easy to see how much similarity or difference there is between. The final piece is asking the teen if they are okay having these thoughts, feelings, and behaviors about the problem, or if they want their own thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. And in which case, you've got your next session mapped out for you. So thanks for watching, and please feel free to download that worksheet from mypeoplepatterns.com/clinicians. If you use the code GOGO, it is free because that's how we roll around here.